Hey, well, welcome to Vitalpoint Church Online. My name is Ron. I'm the pastor of Vitalpoint Church, and I just want to let you know that we just love journeying with people. You know, Vitalpoint Church is made up of people that are exploring faith. They've got questions about faith, wondering about what faith looks like in their lives, and we also have people who are seeking to sink the roots of their faith strong and deep as followers of Jesus. And you know, one of the things that is clear to us as a church is that we understand that when a person begins to journey in faith, whether exploring or growing, is that it's in those spaces where meaning and purpose begins to emerge. And I love that about our church. I love that about Vitalpoint Church. And I just want to say, if you're online for the very first time, that's our heart for you as you move forward in understanding faith in God and church. And so that's part of who we are, and I love that. And as you begin to discover the mission for your life, I want to just share with you something that I'm going to do at the end of the service, at the end of our time together after the closing song. I want to share my heart with some things that are going on in the life of our church, and I just want to invite you to stick around for that. And if you would do that, that'd be fantastic. You know, one of the things that I love is the dawn of a new day. I just find it so amazing. One of my habits in a new day is to be up early, and I sit on the back deck of my house and I have my coffee, my Bible, and oftentimes my journal, and then I'll watch the sun come up. And there's something beautiful and powerful about the dawn of a new day. It's like yesterday's gone, tomorrow's not here, but yet I'm finding myself in this moment. Back in mid-July, a bunch of us, 7 of us, did the MS ride from Grand Bend to London, and back in one day. And we did this to support the cause, but also support my cousin Jess. And we had this incredible, beautiful moment as we left on that ride just after 6 a.m. We were riding and the sun was coming up, and there was something so incredibly powerful to ride in the stillness of the morning and to watch the sun come up. It was absolutely just stunning. And realizing that the dawn of a new day is truly a gift that we get to live into. Well, we're going to talk about that today, the dawn of a new day as it relates to you and me in our journey of faith in a relationship with Jesus. We're in this series called The Story We Live In, and we've been looking at the story of God and beginning to understand how our lives fit into the story of God and how God's story lives in us. We did something a little bit unusual at the beginning of this series. We actually looked at the end of the story. That's just not something we typically do. If you're reading a novel or watching a movie, you don't go to the end to find out what happens. You actually, you kind of start at the beginning and journey towards the end and have the surprise. But what I love about the story of the Christian faith and the story of God is that we get to look at the end of the story. Revelations 21 gives us a clear picture of what God is doing and moving us towards. And it's important for that. It's important to understand that understanding of the new heaven and new earth, because it helps us lean into each and every new day. It helps us to lean into every new experience, every new opportunity, every new challenge, because we begin to know and understand that through faith and through our relationship with God in the person of Jesus Christ is that the story's unfolding no matter what the day looks like or what challenge we are facing, what pain we're maybe going through, because there's this arc of a story that's leading us to that. But in the midst of all this, the dawn of the new day is understanding that when we enter into a relationship with God through the person of Jesus Christ is when we begin to truly understand what it means to be human. It truly brings us into this space where we have this peace, this sense of meaning and comfort because of the relationship with God. You know, I find so interesting at times where we often look at the lens of faith and religion and church through the lens of something in the future. Like this, when Jesus would talk about this, Jesus would talk about the reality of the kingdom of heaven. And there's times where he would say, the kingdom of heaven is near. The people that were listening to that weren't necessarily thinking about something in the future. They were understanding that it was something now. It was something here and now that we get to experience. And even though Jesus said those things some 2,000 years ago, it's a reality for us. It's an understanding of how it can be, and I mean it by the story, can become ours in understanding what it means to be human. We've been looking at this idea of a false self and a true self in this story of God. We are created as image bearers of God, and because of sin and death, there's this idea of a false self that has emerged. And out of the false self, we find our brokenness, we find our shame, we find our guilt. And in our false self, we scratch and claw to try to find our true self. And I want to be careful here, because oftentimes when I say a true self, we look at it through the lens of a Western mindset. And the Western mindset teaches us, well, you be you, and you be true to your truth. And that's not what God was doing through the person of Jesus Christ, bringing about a new humanity. What God was doing through the person of Jesus Christ was bringing about our true selves, which means bringing us back into the right place with himself, so that we as image bearers would understand what it means to live in meaning and purpose, what it means to live on mission in the story of God. Now, we've got to step back for a minute and say, well, how did this happen? Where did this come from? Well, it comes from a very important truth in the Christian faith, and it comes to the moment of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. See, we have to understand that that is the epicenter of the Christian faith. That it is because of Jesus walking out of a tomb that early morning, the dawn of a new day, when Jesus walked out of that tomb. He was conquering sin and death, bringing about what does it mean to be human. See, that's the recreation part of the story. If sin and death brought about decreation, brought about a distortion of our lives, that the image bearers as image bearers were distorted, then what Jesus did was he brought about this beautiful new aspect of what it means to be human. It was that moment, that morning, when the tomb was rolled away and Jesus stepped out and said, I'm back. I don't think he really said that, but when he stepped out, it was this beautiful sense of him bringing about a new humanity, about the recreation of our lives. You know, we look at the Christian faith, or we look at God through the lens of religion, and we begin to think that it's all the things that we do to earn the favor of God, all the things that we do to get the attention of God. It's all the things that we do to ground ourselves in a religious aspect, like I go to church, or I watch church online, or I, read my Bible, or I serve a little bit, and I give a little bit of money online or whatever. And those things are good and those are fine. But the truth is that if we're going to strip away the false self that has the stench of death and take on new clothes, which is life found in Jesus, there's a scent of life. A true self begins to emerge. A new humanity begins to emerge in us and through us. It's almost as if we get a new identity in the person of Jesus Christ. I'll even go as far to say it is about getting a new identity in Jesus. It's the exchange of death to life. There's some verses in the Bible that I find so fascinating and interesting as it connects this for us. Let me just read them for you. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. I just find it here for us. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 speaks to this idea of what is happening in us and through us. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. It says, "For God made Christ, who never sinned, to be the offering for our sins, so that we could be made right with God through Christ." See, I wonder if that's all the longing that we have, is to be made right with God. That idea of of trying to be good enough or to do enough so that we can be made right with God. But the reality is that we're only made right with God through the person of Jesus Christ, that Jesus himself took on death. See, this is important to understand when it relates to the new humanity, is that we aren't just observers of what Jesus did on the cross and his death and his resurrection, but that through his death, it becomes, he took on death for ourselves. It's like he redeemed it for us. He brought about a new way of looking at it for ourselves. And so we see from this that God made Christ, who never sinned. He was perfect, as an offering for our sin, that we could be made right with God. I mean, that is such a beautiful truth of good news for us, that it's his righteousness that becomes part of our lives. See, our righteousness falls short. We'll never know what it truly means to have a new day, a new dawning of a new day of humanity apart from this reality and this truth, that Jesus did this for us. But then there's also another verse that is found in Romans chapter 1, verse 17. It says, "This good news tells us how God makes us right in his sight. This is accomplished from start to finish by faith. As the scriptures say, it is through faith that a righteous person has life." I mean, this is such a powerful reality of the Christian faith, that the resurrected Jesus, the dawn of a new day, is not something that happened, but is happening in us and through us. I want us to take that in for just a moment. That there is a beautiful power that is moving and working and generating through us, bringing about the new creation, the new life in Jesus. And it's by faith. There's this moment where Jesus is challenging his disciples in the crowd. It's actually found in like Mark chapter 8. And he gets very clear on what does it mean to follow him. And it's this idea of where he talks about this, our tendencies to cling to our lives. And we do that, right? We cling on to things and stuff and material gain and things of this world that are good. They're not bad. They're just things that we hold on to, that we think we're going to find life in. And then Jesus says to the crowd, he says, "Turn from your ways, take up your cross and follow me." I mean, that's such a challenge for us. If we're going to truly know what it means to be human, if we are going to truly know what it means to have the resurrection power of Jesus pulsing through our lives and discovering what it means to be human, we must look at this idea of turning, taking, and following. I know it almost sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's like, what? Are you kidding me? That's just a little too much. That's just a little too radical for Jesus to ask us to do that. But the truth is, if you are truly going to know what it means to be into the story of God and to have this recreation story explode out of your life, then we must be willing to take up our cross, turn from our selfishness, and follow him. Now, there's elements of this that I think are so important, because it would be very easy to look at this and go, okay, if the dawn of a new day in humanity, then I'm just going to dig down deep, right? I'm just going to work harder at this. But that's not what we do. What we do is, in the process of turning, taking, following, is this daily surrendering to the work and the power of the Holy Spirit to bring about this new life. Romans chapter 8, verse 11 is another verse I have for us today. I want to read it for you. It says this: "The Spirit of God, who raised Jesus from the dead, lives in you. And just as God raised Christ from the dead, he will give life to your mortal bodies by the same Spirit living within you." I had to be reminded of this truth the other day. My wife and I, we were having dinner and I was in a bad space. Some news had come to us as a church that I'm going to talk about at the end of our service today. And I was pretty discouraged, and I find at times it difficult and to navigate through the personal journey of the new humanity in my relationship with Jesus and the reality of being a pastor of Vitalpoint Church, and sometimes those two worlds get so mixed up and confused, and it's sometimes hard to navigate, and because I don't want my faith to become professional. I mean, it's so easy as a pastor to let my faith become professional. You know, like you got to read the Bible, you got to be at church, you got to prepare messages, and then all of a sudden it becomes very professional. And when it becomes professional, it becomes very distant sometimes for me. But the other day, my wife had to speak into my life, and because I was relying upon myself in my journey of faith, and my strength was gone, and she took me to this verse, and she read a section of a book that she was reading that relates to this verse, and she was saying, you have to remember that it is the power of the Holy Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead that is the same power that's available to you that can bring about life and life to the full. You know, I don't know what you've been thinking about in this season of your journey. I don't know if you're a person of faith or not. I don't know if you're, I don't know if you're a skeptic, or maybe your faith has become a little bit stagnant. I don't know where you're at. Or maybe your faith is great and you're like alive and vibrant, and we want to cheer that on too. But maybe there's something about the story of God and the new humanity that's drawing you in and saying, you know what? I'm done clinging to my life. Because what Jesus says, we're going to cling to our lives, we're going to lose our lives. We're not going to know what it means to be truly human. We're not going to know what it truly means to have that new humanity of the resurrected Jesus in us, and that identity exploding forward in all aspects of who we are in our lives. And maybe today that's your longing. It's your heart, it's your desire to know what it means to have this story unfold. Because that's the thing about Jesus, is that he wants to walk with you. He wants to be with you as you go to work, as you interact with your family, as you navigate the complexity of this life we live, that he wants to walk with you. That's what I love about the Christian faith. It's the exchange of the false self for a true self found in Jesus. But it takes our willingness each and every day to say, Jesus, I need you in my life. I want to surrender. I want to take up my cross. I want to turn from my ways, and I want to follow you. And in that relationship with him, there's a freshness and a newness of what it means to be a human being living on mission within the story of God.